Hello, folks. My name is Amanda, and I am currently studying to be a music teacher here at Boston University. And I have been working in and out of schools for the last 5 years, getting my degree in 5 years. And I have only 3 days left of my student teaching, and then I get to go into the field as a music teacher. And both my experiences in schools and the fact that I am about to enter a field that I think we all know has a lot of things going on right now, has inspired this project for me. So here we are. My project is called Selective Ensembles, Product or People. Music is almost unavoidable. It's ingrained into our everyday lives. Whether this is through things like listening to the radio or singing happy birthday to a loved one, music is all around us. Well, schools are no exception. Music education in the United States follows a similar path, usually from elementary schools, starting with general music and then often giving students the option of participating in available ensembles, typically what we call the big three, which would be orchestra, band, or chorus. Despite the increasing number of racial and linguistic minorities in the United States, especially over the last 25 years, the participation of these demographics in these ensembles stands to reveal a participation barrier, especially with Hispanic students and ELL students in particular being significantly underrepresented in music programs across the country. With music being a place inherently tied to culture, music has the potential for inclusion and relevancy in the lives of this diversifying student body. However, music curriculum and programs have a long history in the United States of excluding the presence of non-dominant cultures, as well as being competitive and exclusive in order to perform and engage with this music at the highest standard. If broad student engagement and success in music education are to be the primary goals of teachers, as the National Association for Music Education states, then this is a worthwhile topic to investigate and an effort to change and perhaps dismantle such exclusionary practices and norms, at least for myself, because this research is not generalizable. So if you are not aware of what ELL means, it stands for English Language Learners. There are several terms that can be used to describe ELL, just EL, multilingual, or multilingual is one that a lot of school districts are changing to use instead, just to celebrate the fact that students speak several languages instead of forcing them to learn a new language because they're in a new country, if they are perhaps an immigrant student. But for the purpose of this project, I'll be using the term ELL, and a quick definition is it is students who are unable to communicate fluently or learn effectively in English, who often come from non-English speaking homes and backgrounds, and who typically require specialized or modified instruction in both the English language and their academic courses. In school environments, ELL students face many challenges in addition to the language barrier, however, including things like isolationism and stereotyping, as well as their cultural identities being left out of the curriculum, often being misidentified as having learning disabilities, and connections with ELL parents being quite difficult to maintain. With regards to music, many ELL students don't have the space in their schedule to include music, or their ELL courses conflict. And even if they find the room, instruction is very language-based and can be very difficult to understand. And this often goes hand in hand with low socioeconomic status, which means that many students do not have the means to afford instruments or lessons. And additionally, if they're migrant students, they could have missed the window to join in the first place, depending on when they come to school. Altogether, these factors, among others, could certainly contribute to an achievement gap that would prevent students from participating in or having a meaningful experience with selective ensembles. And this is all despite data that utilitarian benefits for language, things like strengthening vocabulary and listening, as well as establishing social relationships that encourage communication with language, are research-supported benefits from music for ELL students. Thus, I wanted to investigate how teachers who interact with a large number of ELL students choose to, or perhaps choose not to, include ELL students in their classrooms. Thus, I designed a study which has 2 different methods of data collection. One was teacher interviews. I interviewed 3 teachers in a Boston metro area public school district. I cannot disclose which one it was. And then I also did some student surveys of students in this particular school district as well. I was able to collect 17 surveys from this school, and then based on both, I did a cross-case examination of some things that I thought were interesting from what I gathered. So, and just logistically, it was very difficult, along with the language barrier. But teacher schedules are kind of crazy. It was very difficult to put together this data, to schedule it in the first place, to get beyond, being able to do research with children. So, but here we are. My goal for our survey was to gauge the relevancy and enjoyment of music class for students and how this relates to their perspective on continuing with music as their schooling careers continue. What I generally found was that students do enjoy school music, but it seems like in this particular setting, they have the freedom to choose and to learn things that they're like and they're interested in, which is amazing. But for the majority of students, they noted that school music is very different in school than outside of school. And in addition to this, while the majority of students indicated that they would consider pursuing music in high school, only one student definitively said yes, they would continue music beyond the year that they were in, which was secondary school. As for the teacher interviews, my guiding research goals were to get a sense of how teachers in the district interacted with ELL students and what this has meant for their curricular choices and teaching philosophies. I was able to break this down into 4 main categories of what I gathered. But some main highlights were many teachers instead focus on joy as a main pursuit of music education. They readjust their expectations of what makes a student successful, particularly focusing on personal growth versus comparison to other students. But it was also suggested that professional development specifically for students particularly for teachers in music relating to ELL would be very helpful, and that some divisions in teaching philosophy and preferred methods of curriculum have become evident between older and younger teachers, additionally with a lack of teacher representation that reflects the student body. In the context of each other, the surveys and the interviews bring up some interesting points to consider. Why is it that most kids do not definitively see themselves participating past the school year they're in? They seem to be enjoying music class currently, so what is so difficult about making the choice to continue? I speculated about a couple of reasons that point to the programs they would enter. Perhaps while they're currently interested, they don't feel as if the course offerings will echo their interests in high school. Perhaps the disconnect in what is played or listened to outside of school versus in school, coupled with the lack of teacher representation, stand behind what is being offered to participate in the first place. Perhaps students also attribute less value to music than other things and do not believe that dedicating their time to music is worthwhile or even feasible. This could certainly relate to scheduling issues, which a focus on testing, as teachers in interviews said, is one dictator of class scheduling, which could prevent students from participating. Overall, this all points to the purpose of music education as discussed in the teacher interviews, which could certainly lead into the discussion of older versus younger teachers and pre-service music teacher preparation in changing, while many programs are changing the way that they diversify music education preparation for teachers who are going into the field. This is still something that is only recent and not without contention. And joy is also something that has only recently been introduced as a main purpose of receiving a music education. So while sticking to one way of knowing or doing, in this case in music, is difficult, in so many aspects of the world, it can lead to the exclusion of demographics of people who deserve and have the right to be included if we don't break molds. And if anyone has any questions, I am willing to take them.
Hello, great presentation. I was just wondering, did you only survey ELL students? And if you looked at other students, did you find that they had different attitudes towards continuing with music? Or if you didn't, what would you speculate?
I did not only survey ELL students. Well, something difficult about this, and I think one reason why this data cannot be generalized. One, it's very small study, only 17 students. I actually did not, and this was kind of a fault of my own. I did not ask whether or not they are ELL. This is partly because I'm not really allowed to know any like identifying things about them because of the nature of who I'm studying, minors. So they're vulnerable. But if you look at the general rate in the district of how many students in this particular district are ELL, then I could just, I guess, use that, and it's over 30%, which is a lot larger than the U.S., which is around 10%. So, but something also difficult with that is if there's, I was able to translate. You have to receive student assent as well as parent consent for minors. So I was able to translate it into English and Spanish, but nothing beyond that. And that's also, trusting that children will give the forms to their parents. So this was the small number that I received. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks so much, Amanda, for your compelling presentation. A question about joy and about teacher music education at the collegiate level here in the United States. Where do you see music education and music pre-service teachers like yourself, where do you see yourselves as music teachers in the next, say, 5 or 10 years? And what would you, as an in-service teacher, recommend to music teacher educators, such as me, in terms of the elevation of joy in music making, rather than the dictatorships that seriously exist in schools, and also maybe you can talk about MCAS, the Massachusetts Child Abuse System.
Well, I think that this all kind of stems from, I think music education in the United States is very competition-based, and especially with selective ensembles for older students. Right now, I think a lot of teachers are going into the field and they're thinking that they're going to run these programs that are going to go and compete and win medals, and they're going to be big names, and that's kind of the goal. But I think shifting the attitude towards what students are interested in, and really engaging students to participate in the process of like what is being implemented in curriculum. Like, I think something difficult as a teacher is to kind of step aside and say, I'm not always necessarily the authority on everything, especially if you want students to feel engaged and like what they're learning is relevant. You need to ask them, like, what is it that will make you become involved in this? How can I give you personal agency in your education? And I think particularly with music, with it being something that's so diverse, like you can't know everything, and nothing is necessarily right either. It's cultural. There's so many different things that can be done with it, and asking students as well, if you don't know something, if you're based in one tradition, which basically we are right now, we focus on the European, the Beethoven, the Bach, and on all of that. But what about the other students who do other things, who don't use notation, who, playing like gamelan, they have like, there's a lot of different things besides just reading reading music that's on the page. So I think that, asking students what they do at home and how they can get engaged is my suggestion, I guess.